Yeah. So just a little bit about my background. I did 30 years of tech startup companies at various levels, including as a founder toward the last part of my career. And then I started this angel network starting in 2016, focused on companies that are trying to do social good or environmental good. And we invest in companies that are for profit, that have a business model that is both has elements of business success and an impact mission. Because as angel investors, an angel group is a group of people who are going to make individual investments in startup companies, and they want to have both business success and support making the world a better place. So, the key point of this slide is without business success, you can't deliver any impact because you're out of business. Next slide. So what I need to advance my slides too. This is kind of interesting. This is weird. so, what we look at is two things, right? The business potential and the impact potential. There's something called ESG, which is saying you're a good citizen, you're protecting the environment with your internal operations, you're treating your employees and your customers and your suppliers fairly. Startup companies where it's 2 or 3 people trying to survive for the next 6 months aren't worried about ESG. They're worried about growing the company. So while ESG is an important issue in public companies, in public, like the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, it's not something we look at. Next slide. So the kind of things we look at, you see some examples, companies trying to take care of the environment, to improve health and wellness, education, address wealth inequality, social justice. We also are very supportive of underrepresented founders. If you look at the data, most startup companies funded historically have been led by white males, and that's still largely the case. And so women, people of color, people with different sexual identities are those that we work hard to support. It's neither sufficient nor adequate to get funding from us based on being underrepresented, but we affirmatively act to help these companies along. Next slide. So when we think about impact, we say, what is your basic business mission? It has to be sort of the fundamental building block your company is built upon. We've had companies come and say, oh, we have this great recruiting tool platform. And we've taken the best practices of Facebook and Google, put them on this platform. You can use it to hire all of your employees, and you can use it to hire diverse, underrepresented employees. So we're an impact company. And we say, no, that's not true, because you could use this to hire anyone. You could even hire evil people for an evil enterprise using your platform. You're not an impact company. So it has to be the basic element of why you've done this business. And it really helps for the CEO to have some personal, emotional connection to the mission. Maybe they have an aunt or an uncle who had some disease, and they're trying to support that community of people with that illness, for example. Next slide. So when we think about impact, we try to be as analytical as possible. We'd like to understand how much impact. Is it real impact? Efficacy is the word I like, because it's, they use that in medical and drugs and stuff to say, is this treatment really working? And we want to know whether your impact mission is really working to benefit the world somehow. And so, there could be other people, other groups who see the same societal challenge and are trying to address that same problem. They may have a better solution than you have. They may have a better way to reach beneficiaries than you have. And so, convince us that what you're doing is really going to be beneficial in a meaningful level in society. Sometimes a young entrepreneur will say, I think it'd be nice to do this for people. If I did this, it'd be a good thing to do. and we say, convince us that it'll actually improve their lives. Next slide. So when we think about impact, some of the companies that come to us say, now we're going to help nonprofits raise money or be more efficient operationally. And we say, well, how are you going to measure the impact of those nonprofits on their beneficiaries and know that you're really doing good for the world? Some of the nonprofits may be very ineffective, and there's no way they can tell you how your additional dollars you helped them to raise has made a meaningful difference in their delivery of their benefits. So we like companies that have direct connection to the beneficiaries. So as Juan Thurman, a good friend of mine, said, early stage companies, they're scrambling to survive, to make payroll, to get customers. And it's hard for them to actually think about trying to measure their impact at that stage of the company. Many of them aren't even in the marketplace yet when we fund them. So it's, thinking about measuring and reporting on impact is not a natural act for these young companies. And depending on the type of company, it can be really difficult to measure your impact. An example, there's a company we've invested in that has a mobile app focused at junior high and high school kids who are acting out in the classroom. They're upset. They're mad, they're angry, they're depressed, they're acting up. And they get on this mobile app and explain how they're feeling. They can go through some education, some self-help, maybe even talk to a counselor through an avatar. At the end of the session, they can say they're feeling better. And we can measure that improvement in that 20-minute session. But so there is a measurable result there. On the other hand, if you have a mobile app that's intended to help someone get over their depression, well, most people get over their depression in 6 to 9 months, either because of time or therapy or medication. And what of your app has been a factor in helping them to get past the depression? So a lot of social impacts can be very challenging to measure. Environmental impacts are easier because you can talk about less CO2 going in the atmosphere, certain amount of water being conserved, things like that. So, saying you're an impact company, it's difficult to kind of show in a quantitative, meaningful way the magnitude of your impact usually. Next slide. And this just says the same thing. Companies that have been in the business for a long time may actually be able to do like a randomized controlled trial, but as a startup, you're down here, the bottom of this pyramid. Expert opinions is what you have that maybe says this, that predicts that what you're doing will be helpful. So if you're going to go describe yourself as an impact company before you launch, maybe the best you can do is get some testimonials from your customers or care providers. The example of the dance studio, some of your customers, your clients will say, this dance studio has really made an important difference in my life. The fact that it's solar powered may not make a difference to their experience. It does make you feel good about, how you're being a good steward of the environment. So you have these kind of competing benefits. One is sort of the global environment, but one is also the clients dancing with you. You may be able to cite evidence from outside authorities. There's something called a theory of change that's used by nonprofits to describe why they're going to offer benefits. After you launch, you can start to collect some data with pre-use and post-use surveys, or look at other people trying to solve this problem to see how well your clients are doing versus those. Now you're able to position to really start to describe your impact more clearly. I've said a lot of words here without slowing down. I should stop and let people jump in with questions. This is an example, Flow Below. This is on slide 18, who put aerodynamic fairings around the drive wheels of a long haul tractor trailer cab and special hubcaps on. they could reduce air turbulence and improve fuel efficiency by 1.5% and decrease carbon into the atmosphere by 1.5%. So here's an example of an environmental company where it's easy to measure the benefits. And we invested in them, they got acquired, we made a nice return. It was a great outcome for us. Slide 19, I hinted at this one earlier, 117 Media, that has a mobile app for junior high and high school kids. And okay, if you want to measure this, you'd like to measure that the kids are being less disruptive in the classroom. But who's going to measure that? Teachers are not going to report that every day. And you'd like to measure that the students have better social, emotional well-being and life skills. But how do you measure that? So measurements they might be able to get at are at the school level, decrease in absentee rates or increasing in graduation rates. But now the complication is what contributed to the lower absentee rates. Was it introduction of free lunches? Was it a change in the principal who made the school more welcoming? Was it better teachers? What part of this do you attribute to this app? But that said, we like the team, we like the app, and we invested. Slide 20, there was a company that had a dating app. And what made them unique is that your first date had to be volunteering at a nonprofit. And so they said they're helping out the nonprofits, and that's our social impact. And yes, they probably increased the number of volunteer hours. But the question is, did that couple ever go back to help the nonprofit again? How much was the nonprofit really helped by having some of these couples drop in? And so it's just really hard to measure the impact. And so we said, yeah, we don't know how to think about your impact. We don't think it's substantial, really impactful with high efficacy. So we did not invest. This is a mobile app, a Black millennial out of Houston, a male, who basically, if you know about GoodRx prescription cards, you can get a discount if you don't have insurance on your drugs. They had a similar offering they were distributing through nonprofits, food banks, and other groups, reaching clients who didn't know about the program. And we thought that the mission was pretty clear. We knew there was competitive pressure from GoodRx and others, but we invested. And they've had a hard time making the business model work in terms of generating a lot of revenue. They were expecting to get some commission on every sale, but it's just been a tough model for them. But we like the team, we like the mission, we invested. I would back up and say that angel investors make 20 investments. We expect 10 to 12 to fail within 3 years. And we expect another 8 to kind of survive, not really grow. And the 20, we expect 1 or 2 to be big successes and provide a financial return to the investors that covers all of their prior investment dollars and makes them whole financially. Company B, cattle is a terrible way to deliver protein to the world. They're hard on the environment. They create a lot of methane gas. They denude the land. They destroy the local ecology of plant life balance. And so they had basically beetles who can be grown easily, ground up, and create a high quality protein. And in theory, the shift from cattle-based protein to beetle-based protein sounds very appealing. We weren't sure they get enough traction in the marketplace to really have any meaningful impact on the world, that they could really, with their beetle protein, cause the number of cattle ranches to shrink. So, and also, if they're going to sell this through Whole Foods or somewhere, Whole Foods has a lot of healthy foods. And, how can you determine if a person going into Whole Foods who buys this protein this week is going to have a longer lifespan or less disease than if they bought some other high quality food Whole Food shelves. Maybe they're exercising more, maybe they're drinking less, maybe that's why they're healthier. It's just hard to, the metrics just weren't there. Here's one we invested in. This company recognized that small colleges, small universities, junior colleges can't often offer all the classes needed at the right time for students to graduate on a timely basis. Oh, I need just one more math class that's not going to be offered until next year, so I can't graduate, and they never finish their degree. And so they allow these smaller schools to have online classes to cross-list them all the other small schools in their program. They're doing pretty well. They're getting a lot of traction, getting some revenue, having an impact. And so we feel good about that investment. Another environmental company that we did not invest in, old skyscrapers have single pane glass. There are huge energy losses going through those windows. New York City is now requiring all those buildings to be upgraded. And going in and actually removing all the glass panels on a skyscraper and replacing them is very expensive. And they had a simple way of doing it, basically gluing a second pane on top of the old single pane windows. You could even do it with, window washer type of platforms and relatively low skilled people. But after, we thought about it for a while, realized that these building owners are very conservative and they're very cautious about using new technologies that can jeopardize the value of their expensive buildings. So market acceptance is going to be very slow. And, because of that, we didn't have the company to survive or how soon the impact might happen. So several years ago, we declined to invest. And finally, a few years later, starting to get some traction. So they come back to us, they might get invested now. So it was a timing issue for that company. Binary Bridge, a company up in Wisconsin, recognized that Doctors Without Borders and rural third world clinics don't have good access to medical record systems that are online. You can get these really elaborate medical record systems, but they require electricity to be up all the time, the internet to be up all the time. So they've developed electronic medical records that can go into these remote clinics, whether it's a mission clinic or a permanent clinic, and work when there's only a limited amount of power and internet available during the day. And we liked the team, we liked the mission, we invested in them. Maybe we'll stop with this one, Company D. There's a medical condition where people have an autoimmune condition called vitiligo, and they lose pigmentation on their skin. If you have a dark complexion to start, you get light splotches on your face, you just don't feel good about your appearance. And this company has a way to make the treatments much more accessible to a wide range of dermatologists. Today, not many practice this because the preparation of to do the treatment is very difficult. Well, the problem that we saw was that Medicare, Medicaid, Blue Cross wouldn't pay for their services. So it was only available to people who would self-pay $3,000 for this treatment. And we said, you're not really helping much of the market, only the people who are very well off. And so your impact is limited in terms of scale, and you're not helping underserved people who may need this the most. So I think we'll stop there on these examples and open it up to questions. And I enjoy questions more than talking, so this will be good.
That's great, Bob. Thank you. I think I'd like to just give everybody a second to reflect